Sarah Martinez had always been the quiet one in her group of friends. At 23, she worked as a graphic designer for a small advertising agency downtown, spending most of her days behind a computer screen creating marketing materials for local businesses. She lived in a modest apartment with her roommate Jessica, who was everything Sarah wasn't: outgoing, confident, and effortlessly social. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon through a text message from Jessica. "Big party this Saturday at Marcus Chen's place. His parents are out of town for the weekend. Everyone from college is going to be there. You're coming with me. No excuses this time." Sarah stared at her phone screen, feeling that familiar knot forming in her stomach. She had met Marcus briefly during her college years, though they had never really talked. He came from a wealthy family, lived in one of those sprawling suburban mansions, and always seemed to be surrounded by the popular crowd. The kind of people who made Sarah feel invisible even when she was standing right next to them. "I don't know, Jess. You know how I get at these big parties," Sarah replied, already imagining herself standing awkwardly in a corner while everyone else had fun. Jessica burst through the front door of their apartment just as Sarah was heating up leftover Chinese food for dinner. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the wind outside, and she wore the kind of confidence that Sarah had always envied. "Don't even think about backing out," Jessica said, dropping her purse on the kitchen counter. "You've been hiding in this apartment for months. When was the last time you went out and actually had fun? And I mean real fun, not organizing your art supplies for the third time this month." Sarah knew Jessica was right. Ever since her breakup with David 6 months ago, she had become even more withdrawn than usual. David had been her college boyfriend, the one person who seemed to understand her quiet nature. When he moved to Seattle for a job opportunity, without even discussing it with her first, Sarah had felt like a part of herself had been ripped away. "What if I don't know anyone there?" Sarah asked, stirring her lo mein absently. "You'll know me, and that's enough to start with. Besides, Marcus specifically mentioned you when I ran into him at the coffee shop yesterday. He asked if you were still doing that amazing artwork. Apparently, he remembered some project you did in Professor Wilson's class." This surprised Sarah. She barely remembered Marcus paying attention to anything in their shared art history course, let alone her work. Most of the time, he seemed more interested in flirting with the sorority girls who sat in the front row. The week passed quickly, and before Sarah knew it, Saturday evening had arrived. She spent an embarrassing amount of time choosing an outfit, finally settling on a simple black dress that Jessica had bought her for her birthday. It was more form-fitting than what she usually wore, but Jessica insisted it looked perfect. "You look amazing," Jessica said as they applied their makeup in the bathroom mirror. "That dress shows off your figure, and your hair looks gorgeous down like that." Sarah studied her reflection. Her dark brown hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, and the black dress did seem to complement her olive complexion. She had inherited her mother's Spanish features: dark eyes, full lips, and naturally arched eyebrows. Growing up, her mother always told her she was beautiful, but Sarah had never quite believed it. The drive to Marcus's house took them through the affluent part of town, where the houses got bigger and the lawns more manicured with each passing block. When they pulled into the circular driveway, Sarah could already hear the music pumping from inside the house. Cars were parked along the street, and she could see people moving around through the large windows. "Ready?" Jessica asked, checking her lipstick one more time in the rearview mirror. Sarah took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The front door was already open, with people flowing in and out freely. The house was even more impressive inside than Sarah had imagined. The foyer featured a grand staircase with an ornate banister, and she could see into a living room that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The furniture was all cream-colored leather and dark wood, with expensive-looking artwork covering the walls. Music filled every corner of the house, a mix of current pop hits and throwback songs from their college years. People were everywhere, talking in small groups, dancing in the living room, playing beer pong in what appeared to be a formal dining room that had been converted into a game area for the evening. Marcus appeared within minutes of their arrival, approaching them with a wide smile and a drink already in his hand. He was tall and athletic, with dark hair styled in that effortlessly messy way that probably took him 20 minutes to achieve. His family's money showed in everything from his perfectly fitted clothes to his confident demeanor. "Jessica, Sarah, I'm so glad you could make it, he said, giving Jessica a hug before turning to Sarah. Sarah, you look incredible. I was hoping you'd come tonight. Sarah felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. Thanks for inviting me. Your house is beautiful. Let me get you both drinks and give you the tour, Marcus said, already leading them toward what appeared to be a professional-grade bar setup in the corner of the living room. As they walked through the crowd, Sarah noticed the looks she was getting. Some were friendly nods from people she vaguely recognized from college, but others felt different. There were whispered conversations that seemed to stop as she passed, and she caught a few pointed stares from some of the women present. At the bar, Marcus introduced them to several of his friends, most of whom Sarah didn't recognize. There was Derek, a guy with bleached hair and too many tattoos who worked in real estate. Amanda, a perfectly put-together blonde who apparently worked in public relations. And Jake, who seemed to know everyone and had opinions about everything. So, Sarah, what have you been up to since graduation? Derek asked, moving closer to her than necessary as he talked. She could smell alcohol on his breath and noticed how his eyes kept drifting down from her face. I work in graphic design, Sarah replied, taking a small step backward. Mostly marketing materials and some web design. That's cool. Creative types are always interesting, Derek said with a grin that made Sarah uncomfortable. I bet you see the world differently than the rest of us boring business people. Before Sarah could respond, Jessica grabbed her arm. We need to go say hi to some people, she said, pulling Sarah away from Derek and toward the other side of the room. Was it just me, or was that guy being weird? Sarah asked as they walked. Derek's always been a little handsy when he drinks, Jessica replied dismissively. Don't worry about it. Come on, I want you to meet some people from my work. The evening continued with Sarah being introduced to various groups of people. Most of the conversations were pleasant enough, though she found herself feeling increasingly out of place. These were people who talked about expensive vacations, new cars, and career moves that involved salary figures Sarah couldn't even imagine. She was nursing her second drink of the evening, something fruity that Marcus had insisted she try, when she noticed a group of people gathered around the pool table in the basement game room. Jessica had disappeared somewhere with a guy she'd been talking to for the past hour, leaving Sarah to navigate the party on her own. The basement was finished with the same expensive attention to detail as the rest of the house. There was a full entertainment center with a massive television, multiple gaming systems, and comfortable seating areas. The pool table was the centerpiece. Surrounded by a small crowd cheering and making bets on the current game, Sarah found herself drawn to the game, partly because it gave her something to focus on besides trying to make small talk with strangers. She positioned herself near one of the high-top tables along the wall where she could watch without being in anyone's way. You play? A voice asked beside her. Sarah turned to find a guy she didn't recognize standing next to her. He was maybe a few years older than her, with sandy brown hair and an easy smile. Unlike Derek, he maintained a respectful distance as he talked to her. Not really, Sarah admitted. I mean, I've played a few times, but I'm terrible at it. I'm terrible at it too, but it's still fun, he said with a laugh. I'm Mike, by the way. I work with Marcus. Sarah, nice to meet you. Mike seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her, asking about her work and sharing stories about his own job in marketing. He was easy to talk to, and Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time all evening. They were deep in conversation about the challenges of working with difficult clients when Derek appeared beside them, clearly more intoxicated than he had been earlier. Sarah, there you are. I've been looking for you, Derek said, swaying slightly as he talked. Come dance with me. Oh, I don't really dance, Sarah said politely. But thank you. Come on, don't be shy, Derek insisted, reaching out and grabbing her wrist. One dance won't kill you. Sarah tried to pull her arm away, but Derek's grip tightened. I really don't want to dance right now, she said more firmly. Mike stepped forward. Hey, man, she said no, maybe back off a little. Derek's expression changed, becoming more aggressive. Who asked you, pretty boy? Sarah and I were having a conversation. We weren't having a conversation, Sarah said, still trying to free her wrist from Derek's grip. You just walked up and grabbed me. The situation was starting to draw attention from other people in the basement. Sarah could feel eyes on them, and her face was burning with embarrassment. This was exactly the kind of scene she always tried to avoid. "Look, I think everyone just needs to calm down," Mike said diplomatically. "Derek, why don't you go get some water or something? You might want to slow down a little." "Don't tell me what to do," Derek snapped, finally releasing Sarah's wrist but taking a step closer to Mike. "And don't think you can swoop in and play hero. Sarah's a big girl. She can speak for herself." Sarah rubbed her wrist where Derek had grabbed her, feeling the eyes of everyone in the basement watching the confrontation. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, to find Jessica and leave immediately. "I can speak for myself," Sarah said quietly, "and I'm speaking for myself when I say I want you to leave me alone." Derek laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Oh, come on. Don't be like that. I'm just trying to be friendly. You've been standing around looking miserable all night. I thought you might want to have some actual fun for once." The comment stung because it felt partially true. Sarah knew she probably did look miserable, and she certainly wasn't the life of the party like Jessica or some of the other women there. "She doesn't look miserable to me," Mike said. "She looks like someone who's trying to enjoy herself without being hassled." Derek's face reddened, whether from alcohol or anger, Sarah couldn't tell. "You know what? Forget it. There are plenty of other girls here who know how to have a good time." He stalked away, but not before Sarah heard him mutter something about "stuck up" and "waste of time" under his breath.
"Are you okay?" Mike asked, his voice full of genuine concern.
Sarah nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. "I'm fine. Thank you for stepping in. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Mike said simply. "Nobody should have to deal with that crap." Word of the confrontation seemed to spread quickly through the party. Within half an hour, Sarah noticed more people staring at her, and she caught fragments of whispered conversations as she passed groups of people. "Did you see what happened downstairs?" Derek said she was being a total ice queen. "I heard she caused some big scene." Each comment felt like a small knife, chipping away at her confidence. Sarah found herself retreating to quieter corners of the house, trying to avoid the curious stares and whispered conversations. Jessica finally reappeared around midnight, slightly tipsy and full of stories about the guy she'd been talking to all evening. It took her several minutes to notice that something was wrong with Sarah. "Hey, what happened? You look upset," Jessica said, her words slightly slurred. Sarah explained the situation with Derek, though she downplayed how humiliated she felt by the whole thing. "Oh, honey, don't let Derek get to you," Jessica said, waving her hand dismissively. "He's always been a jerk when he drinks. Nobody takes him seriously." But it wasn't just about Derek anymore. Sarah could feel that something had shifted in how people were looking at her, talking about her. She had become the girl who couldn't take a joke, who had caused drama at Marcus's party. "I think I want to go home," Sarah said quietly. "Already? It's not even that late. The party's just getting good," Jessica protested. "I have a headache," Sarah lied. "And you're having fun. You can get a ride with someone else, right?" Jessica studied her friend's face and seemed to recognize that this wasn't negotiable. "Okay, if that's what you want. But promise me you won't let this ruin parties for you forever." Sarah nodded, though she was already making mental notes to avoid similar situations in the future. The drive home was quiet, with Sarah replaying the evening in her mind. She kept thinking about Derek's words, about how she probably did look miserable, about how she never seemed to fit in at these kinds of events. When she got back to her apartment, she changed into her most comfortable pajamas and made herself a cup of tea. As she sat on her couch wrapped in a soft blanket, she tried to shake off the feeling that something fundamental had changed tonight. She didn't know yet that Derek's version of events would spread through their social circle over the following weeks. She didn't know that her reputation was about to become the subject of gossip and speculation among people she barely knew. All she knew was that she felt small, embarrassed, and more determined than ever to avoid putting herself in vulnerable situations. But sometimes, life has other plans. The story of what really happened that night at Marcus's party would grow and change with each telling, becoming something far removed from the truth of a young woman who simply wanted to be left alone. And Sarah Martinez, quiet graphic designer who just wanted to fit in, was about to learn that sometimes the cost of standing up for yourself is higher than you ever imagined it could be. The weeks following Marcus's party brought an unexpected storm into Sarah's previously quiet life. What she had hoped would be a forgotten incident became the foundation for a narrative that seemed to grow more distorted with each passing day. It started small. Sarah first noticed it at the coffee shop she frequented near her office. Two women she vaguely recognized from college were sitting at a corner table, their voices just loud enough for her to catch fragments of their conversation. "I heard she completely lost it at Marcus's party." "Really? She always seemed so quiet in school." "Apparently she caused this huge scene because some guy asked her to dance." Sarah felt her stomach clench as she realized they were talking about her. She quickly grabbed her coffee and left, but the damage was done. The story was spreading, and it was nothing like what actually happened. At work, Sarah tried to focus on her projects, but concentration became increasingly difficult. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from Jessica, who was dealing with her own fallout from the party. "People are saying crazy things about what happened," Jessica texted during Sarah's lunch break. "Someone told me that you slapped Derek." Obviously, I told them that was ridiculous, but the stories are getting out of hand. Sarah stared at her phone in disbelief. She hadn't even raised her voice, let alone hit anyone. How had the story become so twisted? The answer came the following week when she ran into Amanda, the perfectly put-together public relations woman from the party, at the grocery store. Amanda approached her in the produce section with a concerned expression that felt anything but genuine. "Sarah, hi, how are you doing after everything that happened?" Amanda asked, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I'm fine," Sarah replied cautiously. "Nothing really happened." "Oh, honey, you don't have to pretend with me," Amanda continued, placing a manicured hand on Sarah's arm. "Derek told us all about how you attacked him. He showed us the scratches on his arm. We're all just worried about you." Sarah's mouth fell open. "Scratches? I never scratched anyone. I barely even touched him." Amanda's expression shifted slightly, as if she was filing away Sarah's response for later use. "Well, that's not what Derek says. He's pretty upset about the whole thing. His arm was all marked up the next day." "That's impossible," Sarah said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "I never scratched him. He grabbed my wrist and I pulled away. That's all that happened." But she could see in Amanda's eyes that her protests were only making things worse. Everything she said seemed to confirm some predetermined narrative that had nothing to do with the truth. "Look, I wasn't there for the whole thing," Amanda said with a shrug. "I'm just telling you what Derek said. Maybe you were more upset than you realized. Sometimes when we're drinking, we don't remember things exactly as they happened." Sarah wanted to scream that she had barely had 2 drinks all night, that she remembered every detail with perfect clarity. Instead, she mumbled something about needing to finish her shopping and hurried away, leaving Amanda standing by the apples with a satisfied expression. The encounter left Sarah shaken. If Derek was showing people fake scratches and claiming she had attacked him, what else was he telling people? How could she possibly defend herself against lies that were already spreading faster than she could address them? Her fears were confirmed when she received a text from Mike, the kind man who had defended her at the party. "Hey, Sarah. I wanted you to know that people are spreading some really messed up stories about what happened at the party. I was there, I saw everything, and I'm happy to tell people the truth if you need me to. Derek is being a complete ass about this whole thing." Sarah felt a wave of gratitude for Mike's offer, but also a crushing realization that things had gotten serious enough that she needed witnesses to defend her character. "Thank you," she texted back. "I can't believe this is happening. I just want it all to go away. I know. It's not fair. Derek is telling people you went crazy and attacked him out of nowhere. He's showing off these scratch marks on his arm that definitely weren't there that night. I think he did them to himself." The thought that Derek would injure himself to make her look bad was both horrifying and somehow not surprising. Sarah was beginning to understand that she had underestimated the lengths some people would go to protect their reputation at the expense of hers. Jessica came over that evening with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine, ready to discuss strategy. "Okay, so here's what I've heard," Jessica said, spreading lo mein noodles on her plate. "Derek is telling people that you've always been unstable, that you had some kind of breakdown at the party when he politely asked you to dance. He's saying you attacked him and that Mike had to physically restrain you. Sarah felt sick. None of that is true. Not even close to true. I know that, and you know that, but Derek's been working this story for weeks now. He's got Amanda and some of his other friends backing him up. They're all saying they witnessed it, but Mike was there. He saw what really happened. Jessica sighed. Mike is one person, and he doesn't run in the same social circles as Derek and his friends. Plus, Derek is spinning it like Mike is biased because he was trying to hook up with you. The web of lies was becoming more complex by the day, each new fabrication designed to discredit anyone who might speak in Sarah's favor. "What am I supposed to do?" Sarah asked, feeling helpless. "How do I fight something like this?" "I've been thinking about that," Jessica said carefully. "Maybe you should just lay low for a while. Don't go to any parties or events where Derek might be. Let it blow over." The suggestion stung, even though Sarah recognized the practical wisdom in it. She was being advised to hide, to let lies about her stand unchallenged, because fighting them might make things worse. "So I'm just supposed to let him destroy my reputation and do nothing about it?" I'm not saying do nothing forever, but right now, every time you try to defend yourself, it seems to make people think you're being defensive because you're guilty. Maybe if you just stay quiet, people will lose interest and move on to some other drama. Sarah wanted to believe that was true, but over the following days, it became clear that the story had taken on a life of its own. She started noticing changes in how people treated her, subtle shifts that confirmed the gossip was spreading far beyond Derek's immediate circle. At the gym she occasionally visited, the front desk staff who used to greet her warmly now seemed professional but distant. At her favorite lunch spot, she overheard two women discussing that girl who went psycho at a party while she waited for her order. Most painfully, she began to notice changes at work. Her colleagues, who had always been friendly and inclusive, started having conversations that seemed to stop when she approached. She wasn't invited to the usual happy hour gatherings on Fridays. During a team meeting, her supervisor, Rachel, mentioned that they needed someone to represent the company at an upcoming networking event for young professionals. "I think Jessica Chen from the Morrison account would be perfect for this," Rachel said, looking around the room. "She's got great people skills and really represents our company well." Sarah had been to similar events before and had always volunteered for these opportunities. The fact that she wasn't even considered now felt like a clear message. After the meeting, she approached Rachel privately. "I noticed I wasn't considered for the networking event. Is there a reason for that?" Rachel looked uncomfortable. "Oh, well, we just thought Jessica would be a good fit for this particular event. But I've done networking events before, and they've always gone well." Of course. It's just that this one is going to have a lot of young professionals, and we want someone who's really comfortable in social situations." The implication was clear. Word had somehow reached her workplace that she wasn't good in social situations, that she was someone who caused problems at parties. "Did someone say something to you about me?" Sarah asked directly. Rachel's face reddened slightly. "Nothing specific. I just heard that you'd had some difficulties at a recent social event. We want to make sure our representatives are completely comfortable in networking environments." Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Her professional life was now being affected by Derek's lies. She wanted to explain what really happened, but she could see in Rachel's expression that any defense would only confirm that she was someone who caused drama. "I understand," Sarah said quietly, though understanding and accepting were two very different things. That weekend, Sarah made a decision that would change the trajectory of everything that followed. Instead of continuing to hide and hope the rumors would fade, she decided to face the situation head-on. She had been invited to a birthday party for someone from her college friend group, and her first instinct was to decline. Jessica had already warned her that Derek would likely be there, along with several of the people who had been spreading the stories about her. But something inside Sarah rebelled against the idea of giving Derek that power over her life. She had done nothing wrong, and she was tired of being painted as the villain in a story she hadn't written. "I'm going to Laura's birthday party," she told Jessica over the phone. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Derek will definitely be there, and things could get awkward." "Things are already awkward everywhere I go. At least this way I can try to set the record straight with people who actually know me." Jessica was quiet for a moment. "Okay, if that's what you want to do, I'll support you. But promise me you'll be careful. Don't let Derek bait you into doing anything that could make the situation worse. The party was at a trendy rooftop bar downtown, the kind of place where young professionals went to see and be seen. Sarah chose her outfit carefully, settling on a simple but elegant navy blue dress that made her feel confident without being too flashy. She arrived fashionably late, hoping that most people would already be settled into conversations and less likely to notice her entrance. The rooftop was beautifully decorated with string lights and potted plants, creating an intimate atmosphere despite the open space. Laura, the birthday girl, greeted Sarah with genuine warmth, and for a moment, Sarah felt hopeful that the evening might go better than expected. "Sarah, I'm so glad you came. You look gorgeous," Laura said, giving her a hug. "Come get a drink and tell me what you've been up to." As they walked toward the bar, Sarah noticed Derek holding court near the far end of the rooftop, surrounded by his usual crowd of admirers. He saw her immediately, and she caught the smirk that crossed his face. One problem at a time, she told herself, focusing on her conversation with Laura. For the first hour, things went surprisingly well. Sarah reconnected with several college friends who seemed genuinely happy to see her. Nobody mentioned the party incident, and she began to relax slightly. Then Amanda appeared at her elbow. "Sarah, wow, I'm surprised to see you here," Amanda said with that same fake concern from the grocery store. "Are you sure you're ready for this kind of social setting? I know things have been difficult since your episode." The conversation around them quieted as people picked up on the tension. Sarah realized this was a calculated move, designed to create exactly this kind of public moment. "I didn't have an episode," Sarah said calmly. "I had an interaction with Derek that got blown out of proportion." "Well, that's certainly one way to look at it," Amanda replied with a theatrical sigh. "I just think it's important for people to take responsibility for their actions instead of trying to rewrite history." Sarah could feel eyes turning toward them, people sensing drama and moving closer to hear better. This was exactly what she had hoped to avoid, but Amanda had forced the confrontation. "I am taking responsibility for my actions," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I defended myself when someone grabbed me without permission. That's not an episode. That's a normal human response." "Grabbed you?" Amanda laughed, a sharp sound that carried across the rooftop. "Derek asked you to dance. That's hardly grabbing. He grabbed my wrist when I said no, so you say." But Derek tells a very different story, and he has the scars to prove it. The word scars seemed to echo in the suddenly quiet space around them. Sarah realized that a significant portion of the party was now listening to their conversation. "I never scratched him," Sarah said, louder now because she knew she was addressing more than just Amanda. "I pulled my arm away when he grabbed me. That's all that happened." Derek himself appeared as if summoned by the conversation, his expression a perfect mask of hurt confusion. "Sarah, hey," he said softly, as if approaching a dangerous animal. "I didn't expect to see you here. How are you feeling?" The concerned tone, the careful body language, the way he positioned himself just far enough away to suggest he was afraid of her, it was all performance, but it was masterful performance. "I'm feeling fine, Derek." "How's your arm?" Sarah asked, deciding to address his lies directly. Derek looked confused, as if he didn't understand what she was talking about. "My arm?" "The scratches you've been showing people. The ones you claim I gave you." Derek's eyes widened in apparent surprise. "Sarah, I never said you scratched me. I think there might be some confusion about what happened that night." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Derek was now denying that he had ever claimed she scratched him, making her look like she was imagining things or making up stories. "Amanda just said you had scars to prove it," Sarah said, turning to Amanda for confirmation. But Amanda's expression had changed to one of concerned confusion. "I never said scars, Sarah. I think you might be misremembering our conversation at the store." Sarah realized she was being expertly manipulated. Derek and Amanda had coordinated their stories, and now they were making her look unstable by denying things they had clearly said. "You know what you said," Sarah told Amanda, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "I'm worried about you, Sarah," Amanda replied with perfect concern. "You seem really agitated. Maybe you should sit down for a minute." The suggestion that she needed to sit down because she was agitated made Sarah look exactly like the unstable person they were painting her to be. If she protested, she would seem more agitated. If she accepted the suggestion, she would seem to confirm that she was having some kind of episode. She chose a third option. "I'm going home," she announced, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. "I hope you all enjoyed the show." As she walked toward the exit, she heard Amanda's voice behind her, pitched perfectly for the audience. "I feel so bad for her. She's obviously struggling with something." Sarah made it to the elevator before the tears started. As the doors closed, she caught a glimpse of the rooftop through the glass walls of the building. People were clustered in small groups, undoubtedly discussing what they had just witnessed. She had come to the party hoping to clear her name, but instead she had given Derek and Amanda exactly what they wanted, a public demonstration of her supposed instability. By the time she reached her car, Sarah's phone was already buzzing with messages from Jessica, who had heard about the confrontation from multiple sources. "What happened?" "I'm getting texts from everyone." Sarah realized that her attempt to fight back had backfired spectacularly. She was no longer just the girl who had caused a scene at Marcus's party. Now she was the girl who couldn't let things go, who showed up at parties to confront people and cause drama. The ride home was a blur of traffic lights and tears. Sarah understood now that she wasn't just fighting Derek's lies. She was fighting a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to destroy her reputation and social connections. What she didn't yet understand was how much further Derek was willing to go, or how much more she would have to lose before the story reached its conclusion. The war for Sarah's reputation had moved into its second phase, and the casualties were mounting on both sides. The weeks following Laura's birthday party marked a turning point in Sarah's ordeal. What had begun as whispered gossip now felt like an organized campaign of character assassination. The story of her supposed breakdown had evolved into something far more sinister, and Sarah found herself fighting battles on multiple fronts. The first major blow came through her work. Rachel called her into the office on a Tuesday morning, her expression serious and uncomfortable. "Sarah, we need to discuss some concerns that have been raised," Rachel began, shuffling papers on her desk without meeting Sarah's eyes. "What kind of concerns?" "We received a call from someone claiming to be a potential client. They said they had heard troubling things about one of our employees and wanted to make sure they weren't working with someone who might be unstable in professional settings." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "Someone called about me specifically?" "They mentioned your name, yes. They said they had heard you had problems controlling your temper in social situations and wanted to know if that extended to your professional behavior." The calculated nature of the attack was breathtaking. Someone had taken the time to research where she worked and make a complaint designed to threaten her livelihood. "Rachel, you've worked with me for 2 years. Have you ever seen me lose my temper or behave unprofessionally?" "No, of course not, which is why I'm talking to you about this instead of taking immediate action. But I need to understand what's going on in your personal life that might be affecting your professional reputation." Sarah explained the situation at Marcus's party, the spreading rumors, and Derek's increasingly vindictive behavior. As she talked, she could see Rachel's expression shifting from concern to something that looked uncomfortably like doubt. "So this all stems from one incident at a party several months ago?" "It stems from me refusing to dance with someone who got aggressive when I said no." Rachel nodded slowly. "I believe that you believe that's what happened. But Sarah, if people are calling your workplace to complain about your behavior, this has moved beyond a simple misunderstanding." The phrase, "that you believe that's what happened," stung worse than an outright accusation. It suggested that Sarah's version of events might be delusional, that her perception of reality couldn't be trusted. "I have a witness," Sarah said. Mike was there and saw everything. One witness against multiple people who apparently saw something different? Sarah realized that Derek's strategy was more sophisticated than she had given him credit for. By recruiting multiple people to support his version of events, he had created a situation where her lone defender looked like either a liar or someone who had been deceived. "I'm not going to take any disciplinary action at this time," Rachel continued, "but I need you to understand that your professional reputation is at stake here. If this continues to affect the company, we'll have to reconsider your position." Sarah left the meeting feeling like she was trapped in a nightmare. Her job, which had always been her safe space, now felt precarious. Worse, she realized that Derek, or one of his allies, had escalated their campaign, to include her professional life. That evening, Jessica came over with wine and a plan. "We need to fight back," Jessica announced, setting the bottle on Sarah's kitchen counter with determination. "This has gone way too far. Derek is literally trying to destroy your life. What can I do? Every time I try to defend myself, I just make it worse. Not if we're smart about it. I've been thinking about this, and Derek has made some mistakes. He's gotten overconfident." Jessica pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a series of screenshots from social media. "Look at this. Derek posted these photos from a bar crawl last weekend. Look at the timestamps and compare them to these texts he sent to Amanda about how traumatized he still is from your attack." Sarah studied the images. In the photos, Derek looked happy and carefree, surrounded by friends and clearly having a great time. The timestamps showed they were taken just hours after he had sent Amanda lengthy messages about being afraid to go out in public because of what Sarah had supposedly done to him. "He's been playing up the victim angle hard," Jessica continued. "But he can't keep his story straight when he thinks nobody is paying attention." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a spark of hope. "What do you think we should do?" "I think it's time to start documenting everything. Every lie, every inconsistency, every time someone repeats a story that doesn't match what actually happened. Derek thinks he's untouchable because he's got a network of people backing him up, but networks can fall apart when people realize they've been manipulated." Sarah spent the next several days following Jessica's advice, carefully documenting every interaction and every story she heard about herself. The process was emotionally exhausting, but it revealed patterns she hadn't noticed before. Derek's version of events had changed multiple times over the months. Initially, he had claimed she had scratched him. When Sarah challenged that at Laura's party, he had denied ever saying she scratched him. But Amanda had slipped up and mentioned scars, not scratches, suggesting there was confusion even among Derek's own allies about which lie they were supposed to be supporting. More importantly, Sarah realized that Derek had made a crucial error. He had involved too many people in his lies, and some of them were starting to contradict each other. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Sarah received a message on social media from a woman named Claire, who had been at Marcus's party, but whom Sarah didn't remember meeting. "Hi, Sarah. I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I was at Marcus's party and heard about everything that's been happening since then. I wanted you to know that I saw what really happened between you and Derek, and it's nothing like what he's been telling people." Sarah's hands trembled as she read the message. "Would you be willing to talk about what you saw?" They agreed to meet at a coffee shop across town, somewhere neither of them was likely to run into Derek or his friends. Claire turned out to be a soft-spoken woman about Sarah's age who worked as a nurse at a local hospital. "I was sitting on one of the couches in the basement when Derek approached you," Claire explained, stirring sugar into her coffee. "I saw him grab your wrist, and I saw you try to pull away. You looked uncomfortable and a little scared, but you never raised your voice or got physical with him. Why didn't you say anything before now?" Claire looked embarrassed. "Honestly, I don't really run in that social circle, and I figured it was none of my business. But then I started hearing these crazy stories about how you attacked him, and I realized that someone needed to speak up for the truth. Would you be willing to tell other people what you saw?" "I'll tell anyone who wants to listen," Claire said firmly. "What Derek is doing to you is horrible, and it needs to stop." Armed with Claire's testimony and the documentation she had been gathering, Sarah felt ready to take a more aggressive approach to clearing her name. Jessica suggested they start by confronting some of Derek's key allies with the evidence of his lies. The opportunity came at a charity fundraising event that many people from their social circle were attending. Sarah hadn't planned to go, but Jessica convinced her that it was time to stop hiding. "Derek will be there, and so will Amanda and most of the people who have been spreading these stories," Jessica argued. "This is your chance to present the truth to a large group of people all at once." The fundraiser was held at an upscale hotel downtown, with cocktails and silent auction items displayed throughout an elegant ballroom. Sarah chose her outfit carefully, settling on a professional but approachable black blazer and pants combination that she hoped would convey seriousness without aggression. She and Jessica arrived early, hoping to speak with people before Derek's arrival. The strategy initially seemed to work. Sarah was able to have calm, rational conversations with several acquaintances, presenting Claire's testimony and the documented inconsistencies in Derek's story. Most people seemed surprised by the evidence Sarah presented. A few admitted that Derek's version of events had never quite made sense to them, but they hadn't wanted to get involved in what they saw as personal drama. "I always wondered why you would attack someone out of nowhere," said Tom, a guy Sarah had known casually in college. "It just didn't seem like something you would do." Sarah was encouraged by these conversations. For the first time in months, she felt like people were actually listening to her side of the story. Then, Derek arrived. He entered the ballroom with his usual confidence, immediately gravitating toward a group of his friends near the bar. Sarah noticed that he scanned the room quickly and spotted her within moments of his arrival. Instead of avoiding her as she expected, Derek walked directly toward where she was standing with Jessica and Tom. "Sarah, I'm glad you're here," Derek said, his voice pitched loud enough for nearby conversations to pause. "I've been hoping we could clear the air about what happened at Marcus's party." Sarah felt her stomach tighten, recognizing that Derek was about to create another public scene. But this time, she was prepared. "I'd be happy to clear the air, Derek. Would you like to start by explaining why you've been telling people I scratched you when we both know that never happened?" Derek's expression shifted to one of confused concern. "Sarah, I've never said you scratched me. I think you might be confused about what I actually said to people. Amanda mentioned the scars you showed people." "I think Amanda misspoke," Derek replied smoothly. "She probably meant the bruises on my wrist where you grabbed me." Sarah felt a familiar sense of disorientation. Derek was once again changing his story, but doing it so smoothly that anyone who hadn't been following the details closely would assume she was the one who was confused. "I didn't grab your wrist, Derek. You grabbed mine. I have a witness who saw the whole thing." "Oh, you mean Mike?" Derek's tone suggested he had been expecting this. "Yeah, I heard he's been backing up your version of events." "That's sweet of him, but I think his perspective might be a little biased. Don't you? I mean, he was pretty clearly trying to hook up with you that night." The implication was clear and devastating. Derek was suggesting that Mike's testimony couldn't be trusted because he had romantic motivations for lying. "I have another witness," Sarah said, feeling Claire's presence even though she wasn't at the event. "Someone who has no reason to lie for me." Derek's confidence seemed to waver slightly. "Another witness? Claire Morrison. She was sitting on the couch in the basement and saw everything that happened." For the first time since the ordeal began, Sarah saw genuine concern flash across Derek's features. He clearly didn't remember Claire being there and hadn't accounted for her in his calculations. "I don't know who that is," Derek said, but his voice lacked its usual certainty. "She's a nurse who was at the party. She saw you grab my wrist and she saw me pull away. She's willing to tell anyone who wants to hear the truth about what happened." Derek recovered quickly, but not before several people in the gathering crowd had noticed his moment of uncertainty. "Look, Sarah, I really think you're blowing this whole thing out of proportion," he said, shifting tactics. "We had a misunderstanding at a party months ago. I tried to ask you to dance. Things got a little awkward and that was it. I don't know why you're so fixated on this." The word fixated was carefully chosen. It suggested that Sarah was obsessed, unable to let things go, potentially unstable. "I'm fixated on it because you've spent months lying about what happened and destroying my reputation," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I haven't been lying about anything," Derek said, looking around at the crowd with an expression of bewildered innocence. "I've barely talked about that night at all. If people have been gossiping about it, that's not my fault." Sarah realized she was dealing with someone who was either a pathological liar or genuinely believed his own fabrications. The Derek standing in front of her seemed completely convinced of his own innocence, despite the mountain of evidence to the contrary. "You called my workplace," Sarah said, deciding to reveal her strongest piece of evidence. "Someone called my company to complain about my supposedly unstable behavior. That wasn't gossip, Derek. That was a deliberate attempt to sabotage my career." Derek's eyes widened in what appeared to be genuine surprise. "I never called your workplace. Why would I do that?" Once again, Sarah found herself in the position of making an accusation she couldn't definitively prove. She strongly suspected Derek was behind the call to her company, but she had no concrete evidence. If you didn't call, then who did? I have no idea. Maybe someone who was genuinely concerned about your behavior? I mean, you did show up at Laura's birthday party specifically to confront me about something that happened months earlier. That's not exactly normal behavior. Derek was masterfully reframing the narrative, making Sarah's attempt to clear her name look like stalking or harassment. Amanda appeared at Derek's side, as if she had been waiting for the perfect moment to join the conversation. Derek's right, Sarah. You've been bringing this up at every social event for months. People are starting to get really uncomfortable, Amanda said, her voice full of theatrical concern. That's not true, Sarah protested, but she could see that some people in the crowd were nodding along with Amanda's characterization. Maybe it's time to consider that you might need to talk to someone about why you're having such a hard time moving past this, Amanda continued. There's no shame in getting help when you need it. The suggestion that Sarah needed professional help for her mental state was the final blow. In one carefully orchestrated conversation, Derek and Amanda had managed to paint Sarah as an obsessed, unstable woman who was harassing an innocent man. Sarah looked around at the faces surrounding her. Some showed sympathy, others showed discomfort, and a few showed what looked like fear. She realized that no amount of evidence or witnesses would matter if people believed she was fundamentally unstable. You're right, Sarah said quietly, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. I do need help. I need help figuring out how to fight people who are willing to lie without conscience. She turned and walked away from the crowd, leaving behind a room full of people who would undoubtedly spend the rest of the evening discussing her mental state and Derek's patience in dealing with her harassment. Jessica caught up with her in the hotel lobby, her face flushed with anger. That was a complete setup, Jessica said. They planned that whole conversation. I know, Sarah replied, feeling defeated. And it worked perfectly. As they waited for the valet to bring their car, Sarah realized that she had been fighting the wrong battle. She had been trying to prove that Derek was lying, but Derek had been more interested in proving that she was crazy. And in the court of public opinion, crazy was much easier to sell than liar. The ride home was silent, both women lost in their own thoughts about how badly the evening had gone. Sarah stared out the window at the city lights, wondering how someone could systematically destroy another person's life and still manage to position themselves as the victim. She didn't know it yet, but Derek wasn't finished with her. The confrontation at the charity event had been just another move in a longer game, and Sarah was about to discover exactly how far her tormentor was willing to go to ensure his victory was complete. The battle for Sarah's reputation had entered its final phase, and the stakes were about to get much higher. The aftermath of the charity event marked the beginning of what Sarah would later refer to as her darkest period. Derek's masterful performance had achieved exactly what he intended. She was now widely viewed as an unstable woman who couldn't let go of a minor incident. The whispers followed her everywhere, and social invitations that had already become scarce disappeared entirely. But Sarah Martinez was about to discover that sometimes, when someone pushes too hard for too long, they create the very monster they claimed existed all along. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the charity event. Sarah was working late at the office, trying to catch up on projects while dealing with the increasing isolation from her colleagues. The building was nearly empty when her phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Is this Sarah Martinez? The voice was male, professional, and unfamiliar. Yes, who is this? This is Detective James Rodriguez with the City Police Department. I need to ask you some questions about a harassment complaint that's been filed against you. Sarah's blood went cold. A harassment complaint? Yes. Derek Thompson has filed a formal complaint alleging that you've been stalking and harassing him for several months. He claims you've been showing up at events specifically to confront him, sending threatening messages and making his friends and family feel unsafe. Sarah sank into her desk chair, her hands shaking. That's not true. None of that is true. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station tomorrow morning to discuss this situation. This is a serious matter, and Mr. Thompson has provided significant documentation to support his claims. After she hung up, Sarah sat in the empty office building and finally understood the full scope of Derek's plan. He hadn't just been destroying her reputation socially and professionally, he had been building a legal case against her. Jessica arrived within 20 minutes of Sarah's frantic phone call, bringing coffee and a fierce determination to help her friend fight back. "This is insane," Jessica said, pacing around Sarah's living room. "Derek is the one who's been harassing you. How is he getting away with filing a complaint against you?" "Because he's smarter than we gave him credit for," Sarah replied, her voice hollow. "Think about it from an outside perspective. He asked me to dance, I said no, and since then I've confronted him at multiple public events. To someone who doesn't know the full story, it probably does look like I'm obsessed with him." "But you were defending yourself. Try explaining that to a detective who's probably already decided I'm some kind of stalker ex-girlfriend." Sarah spent the rest of the evening preparing for her meeting with Detective Rodriguez, gathering every piece of documentation she had collected over the past months. Text messages, social media screenshots, witness statements from Claire and Mike, anything that might help explain her side of the story. The police station was exactly as intimidating as Sarah had expected. Detective Rodriguez was a middle-aged Hispanic man with kind eyes but a professional demeanor that made it clear he was taking Derek's complaint seriously. "Martinez, I want you to understand that harassment and stalking are serious crimes," he began, opening a thick folder on his desk. "Mr. Thompson has provided detailed documentation of what he describes as a months-long campaign of harassment. Detective, may I ask what kind of documentation?" Rodriguez consulted his notes. Text messages, social media interactions, witness statements from people who say they've observed you confronting Mr. Thompson at various events. He's also provided medical documentation of injuries he claims you inflicted. Sarah's mouth fell open. "Medical documentation?" Photos of scratches and bruises, along with a doctor's report stating that the injuries were consistent with an assault. The scope of Derek's fabrications was breathtaking. He had created fake injuries, convinced a doctor to document them, and built an entire false narrative around them. "Detective Rodriguez, I need you to understand something," Sarah said carefully. "Derek Thompson has been running a systematic campaign to destroy my reputation for months. He's the one who's been harassing me." She presented her own documentation, walking the detective through the timeline of events from Marcus's party to the charity fundraiser. She showed him the inconsistencies in Derek's story, the witness statements from Claire and Mike, and the evidence of Derek's lies about his injuries. Rodriguez listened patiently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. Sarah could see him comparing her documentation with Derek's file, and she held her breath waiting for his assessment. "Ms. Martinez, this is a complex situation," he finally said. "You both have compelling evidence and witness statements. But I have to tell you, Mr. Thompson filed his complaint first, and his documentation is quite extensive. Detective, please. Look at the medical report he provided. Ask yourself why someone who was supposedly traumatized by an attack would wait months to see a doctor about their injuries." Rodriguez glanced at the file again, and Sarah saw a flicker of doubt cross his face. "I'll tell you what I'm going to do," he said. "I'm not going to file formal charges at this time, but I am going to issue a mutual restraining order. You and Mr. Thompson are to have no contact with each other, and neither of you is to attend events where you know the other person will be present." "But that means he wins," Sarah protested. "He gets to keep his social circle while I'm banned from seeing my friends." "Miss Martinez, from where I sit, it looks like you both need to stay away from each other. This situation has escalated far beyond what anyone should have to deal with." Sarah left the police station with a temporary restraining order and a growing understanding that the legal system wasn't designed to handle sophisticated social manipulation. Derek had used the system against her, turning her attempts to defend herself into evidence of harassment. But something had changed in Sarah during that meeting with Detective Rodriguez. The fear and humiliation that had dominated her life for months were being replaced by something else. Anger. Pure, focused rage at the injustice of her situation. That evening, she called Mike and asked him to meet her for coffee. "I need to ask you something," she said when they were seated at a quiet corner table. "Are you willing to help me fight back? Really fight back, not just be a character witness." Mike studied her face, noting the new determination in her expression. "What do you have in mind?" "Derek has been playing a sophisticated game, but he's made mistakes. Big ones. I think it's time to show people who he really is." Sarah had spent months trying to defend herself against Derek's lies, but she realized now that defense wasn't enough. It was time to go on the offense. Working with Mike and Jessica, Sarah developed a plan that was both elegant and devastating. Instead of continuing to argue about what happened at Marcus's party, they would expose Derek's pattern of manipulative behavior. The breakthrough came when Mike reached out to his network of friends and acquaintances, asking if anyone had ever had negative experiences with Derek. The response was eye-opening. 3 women came forward with stories of Derek's aggressive behavior at parties and bars. 2 men described business dealings where Derek had lied and manipulated situations to his advantage. Most importantly, a woman named Rachel, not Sarah's supervisor, but someone from Derek's past, provided documentation of a previous incident where Derek had fabricated harassment claims against an ex-girlfriend. He did this before, Rachel explained during a 3-way phone call with Sarah and Jessica. My friend Emma went through something very similar 2 years ago. Derek asked her out. She said no, and suddenly she was being portrayed as an obsessed stalker who couldn't handle rejection. What happened to Emma? She moved to another city because she couldn't handle the social pressure. But I kept all the text messages and emails from that time period, because something about Derek's behavior felt wrong. Sarah felt a mix of vindication and horror. She wasn't Derek's first victim, and she probably wouldn't be his last if someone didn't stop him. Armed with this new information, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible to her just months earlier. She was going to expose Derek publicly. Consequences be damned. The opportunity came when Marcus announced he was having another party, an end-of-summer celebration at his family's house. Sarah knew Derek would be there, along with most of the people who had been involved in spreading lies about her. Are you sure about this? Jessica asked as they prepared for what Sarah was calling the final confrontation. I'm tired of being afraid, Sarah replied, checking her appearance in the mirror. Derek has spent months painting me as unstable and obsessed. Maybe it's time to show people what someone who's actually been pushed to their limit looks like. Sarah arrived at the party with a folder full of documentation and a determination that surprised even her. She had spent months being reactive, responding to Derek's moves instead of making her own. Tonight, she was taking control of the narrative. She found Derek exactly where she expected him, holding court near the pool, regaling a group of admirers with some story that had them all laughing. Derek! She called out, her voice carrying across the patio. I think it's time we told everyone the real story. The laughter died as people turned to look at her. Derek's expression shifted from surprise to practiced concern. Sarah, you're not supposed to be here, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The restraining order is mutual, Derek. You're not supposed to be around me either. But since we're both here, let's finally clear the air. Sarah opened her folder and began reading from Rachel's documentation about Derek's previous victim. Emma Johnson, 2230. Derek asked her out, she said no. Suddenly, she was being accused of stalking him. Sound familiar? Derek's face reddened, but he maintained his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Jennifer Walsh, 2024. Derek got aggressive with her at a bar. She complained to the manager. Suddenly, she was being portrayed as a drunk troublemaker who couldn't handle her alcohol. Sarah continued reading, case after case of Derek's manipulative behavior. With each example, she could see doubt creeping into the faces of his supporters. This is ridiculous, Derek said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. You're just making things up now. Am I? Sarah pulled out her phone and began playing an audio recording. This is a conversation between Derek and his friend Kevin, recorded 2 weeks ago. Derek's voice came through the phone speaker clearly. The crazy thing is, Sarah actually thinks people believe her. She has no idea that I've been 3 steps ahead of her this whole time. I've got half her friends thinking she's unstable, and the other half are too scared to get involved. It's actually pretty easy to destroy someone's reputation if you know what you're doing. The recording continued, with Derek describing his strategy in detail, laughing about Sarah's attempts to defend herself, and bragging about how he had manipulated the police complaint. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek stood frozen, his face white with shock and rage. Where did you get that recording? He demanded. Kevin gave it to me, Sarah replied calmly. Turns out when you brag about psychologically torturing someone, people start to question what kind of person you really are. The crowd around the pool was staring at Derek with expressions ranging from disgust to disbelief. Amanda, his most loyal supporter, took a step away from him. "Derek, is this true?" Amanda asked, her voice small. "Of course it's not true," Derek exploded, his carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "She's obviously edited that recording somehow. You can't trust anything she says. She's been obsessed with me for months." But the damage was done. The recording had revealed Derek's true character in his own words, and no amount of explanation could undo that. "I think we should call the police," someone in the crowd suggested. "Already done," Mike announced, holding up his phone. "They should be here any minute." Derek's eyes darted around the crowd, looking for support, for someone to believe his denials. But the people who had spent months enabling his lies were now seeing him clearly for the first time. "You're all idiots if you believe her," Derek snarled, his mask finally slipping completely. "She's a pathetic loser who couldn't handle being rejected. I was doing her a favor by paying attention to her at all." The cruel words revealed more about Derek's character than anything Sarah could have said. This was the real person behind the charming facade, someone who saw hurting others as entertainment. When the police arrived, it was Detective Rodriguez who took Derek's statement. Sarah watched with satisfaction as the same detective who had issued her a restraining order listened to the evidence of Derek's systematic harassment campaign. "Mr. Thompson, based on this new evidence, I'm placing you under arrest for filing a false police report and criminal harassment," Rodriguez announced. As Derek was led away in handcuffs, he made one final attempt to salvage his reputation. "This isn't over, Sarah," he shouted. "You think you've won, but nobody's going to forget what kind of person you really are." But the crowd's reaction told a different story. People were approaching Sarah to apologize, to express their regret for believing Derek's lies, to offer their support. Amanda was among the first to approach her. "Sarah, I owe you a huge apology," she said, tears in her eyes. "I can't believe I helped him do this to you. I feel sick about it." "Why did you believe him?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Amanda thought for a moment. "Because it was easier than admitting I might be wrong about someone I considered a friend, and because Derek was very good at making his lies sound reasonable." Over the following weeks, the full extent of Derek's manipulation came to light. More victims came forward, sharing their own stories of how Derek had systematically destroyed their reputations when they didn't give him what he wanted. Sarah's workplace apologized and offered her additional responsibilities and a promotion. Her social circle not only welcomed her back, but seemed determined to make up for the months of isolation she had endured. Most importantly, Sarah discovered that fighting back had changed her in ways she never expected. The quiet, reserved woman who had been afraid to make waves had been replaced by someone who understood her own strength and wasn't afraid to use it. Derek was eventually convicted of criminal harassment and sentenced to community service and mandatory anger management classes. The restraining order was modified to be one way. Derek was forbidden from contacting Sarah, but she was free to live her life without restrictions. On a warm evening 6 months after Derek's arrest, Sarah stood on the same rooftop where Amanda had confronted her. But this time she was surrounded by friends who genuinely cared about her. "Do you ever regret fighting back?" Jessica asked, joining her at the railing overlooking the city. Sarah considered the question. The battle had cost her months of her life, damaged her career, and forced her to discover parts of herself she never knew existed. "No," she said finally. "Derek was counting on me being too scared and too polite to fight back. He almost destroyed my life because he thought I would just take it. I'm glad I proved him wrong." "What would you tell someone else going through something similar?" Sarah looked out at the city lights, thinking about all the other people who might be dealing with their own Derek Thompsons, the manipulators, the gaslighters, the people who destroy others for sport. "I'd tell them that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to become someone they didn't expect you to be," she said. "Derek thought he knew who I was. Quiet Sarah who wouldn't fight back. He was wrong." As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying a social gathering for the first time in almost a year. She had learned valuable lessons about friendship, about standing up for herself, and about the difference between being kind and being a pushover. The shy graphic designer who had been humiliated at Marcus's first party was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous to those who might try to hurt her. Derek had set out to destroy Sarah Martinez, but in the end, he had created something he never saw coming. A woman who refused to be anyone's victim. The party that had started her nightmare had ended, but the woman who had survived it was just beginning to understand her own power. And that, Sarah thought as she laughed with friends under the stars, was a victory worth fighting for.